minute. Okay, so it looks like we are live now on our second talk on talking social enterprise. With all new technology dependent on good service like bandwidth, we are not all on the call yet. We all have been on the call, but we couldn't all speak. So Jaco and Karen, in fact, is trying to sort out that we can, in fact, not only see but also hear Karen. So she had to jump off the call and will be back with us shortly. But yeah, on the call today is myself, Christoph. Jaco will join us soon. Marcus, we see, and perhaps Marcus, we can chat so long about what's been up in the broader field of our experience in social enterprise. I must say, I myself was fortunate in being involved in training of entrepreneurial women in two towns, Tulbagh and Knysna, in the past 2 weeks with the Department of Environmental Affairs in opportunities in the green economy. And I found that quite inspiring to be working with people that are busy in different kinds of businesses, making a difference in the greening field too. So these are businesses from recycling into crafts to production of compost, and a lot of stuff in between. And it was great to introduce to them a planning tool that could help them in making sure that they cover all the things that they need to in terms of expanding their businesses. So that's been on my radar in the past 2 weeks. And I must say, it's always when one engages with people that are busy with stuff that you find that there's so much richness. I'm not sure if you find it as well. Theory and so on is all going well, but when we engage with people, it all becomes real.
And yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed my conference up in Joburg recently, and it's called Colloquium on the Social Economy. It's a big conference hosted by the University of Johannesburg with quite a lot of government presence. And it was just interesting to see that everyone was talking about social enterprise now, and also cooperatives, but more importantly, social enterprises. And I see Karen's here, but now she's dropped out again. So Jaco's obviously dealing with her still. But perhaps I'll just say, so this conference I was at, you had about, I'd say, 250 people up in Johannesburg, and the government was clearly talking about social enteprises. They didn't know what to do with them, so no one was that clear about exactly what they were, how they operated, and what were the factors that were helping them or undermining them. But what's very clear is that, yeah, it's part of the mixed bag of the social economy that everyone's promoting at the moment. And so the government doesn't really see social enterprises as a separate unit, as social enterprises getting special treatment. And at the moment, all their focus seems to be on this thing called the social economy, which is cooperatives and stokvels and traditional non-profit organizations and social enterprises all thrown in a mixed bag. Now, the challenge for them is because the market is so diverse. I mean, these are very different types of organizations. Trying to design a single strategy for all of them is going to be much trickier than one anticipated. So we'll see what happens in that space.
Yes, so are you saying that the view there was that the rules applying to social enterprise is a bit different from other business or organizations?
That's my experience, is that each type of organization needs a slightly different policy environment to support it. So, for example, you might find that a non-profit organization that relies very much on grants requires certain laws to be implemented that are quite different from those that would support a social enterprise. For example, about the percentage of funds that a foundation has to give out every year. And requiring that foundations give away a huge amount of funds is clearly good for your non-profit organization that wants funding. But
Marcus, can I interrupt?
Sorry,
can I interrupt you quickly?
Yes.
Your voice is kind of coming through a tunnel of water, it sounds like. So I wonder if, until your bandwidth is better, if you didn't want to switch off your video for a moment or two, and then we try it back later. Maybe the bandwidth improves. So at least I mean,
is that a bit?
you see your smiling
is that a bit
face.
better now?
That's better. Yeah. We see your smiling face and can hear you.
Okay, so you can hear me.
Sorry for interrupting you.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that, for example, a foundation, if you change the law requiring how much a foundation needs to give to charity or give out every year, and on one hand, if you require them to give out a lot of money, a high percentage of the income they have, then that's really good for your traditional grant-based non-profit organization. But if you require that, if you allow them to hold and save a lot, then that's really good if they decide to invest, because they can build up this big investment base. So it's not every rule favors everyone, and there are distinctive differences between the type of policy that supports a cooperative versus a type of policy that supports a non-profit or a stokvel. And the big challenge is that because of the new growth path, which is the government's major strategy driving the social economy, where they want to create 260,000 jobs in the social economy, that everyone has just been lumping everything together. And I'm not sure that thing's going to work. Okay.
So the use of the term social economy within the context of the conference that you've been at,
yes.
How is that used? How is that defined?
Well, social economy is, so it's the economy of those organizations essentially that are trying to make a difference to the world, and and tackle social issues and so on. And it's a mixed bag. It's defined as your non-profit organizations, and both those that generate income, like social enterprises, and those that rely on grants. It consists of the much more informal non-profits, so community associations, street committees, CBOs, and so on. Certainly stokvels, which is the South African saving clubs that are very popular, and there are many of them around. Cooperatives, which are being supported very heavily by the DTI. And then, of course, social enterprises that have a for-profit legal form. So it's such a mixed bag. It's like when they were designing the new growth path, someone said, but wait, we can create over 100,000 jobs in this economy. We just need to make sure that the government's able to provide a much more enabling environment for them. And at the moment, that entire government strategy has been driven by the Department of Economic Development. And yet it's unsure now whether that is going to be moved across to the new Ministry of Small Business or not. So certainly the strategy is sitting in the middle of a transition, and I don't think government's really sure about what to do in the space yet.
So that's interesting, perhaps specifically around the environment that's created and the policies that are put in place. However, when I engage with people that are involved in an NPO as opposed to a for-profit business with social impact,
yes.
One would say that, yeah, the rules are perhaps a bit different there, especially if the funding model is significantly different. But as soon as you move into the space of self-generation of funds, even if it's a non-for-profit, and you move into the space of value exchange, where there may be money flowing or some other exchange of value, that the principles are pretty much the same. Sort of whether you operate a cooperative or a close corporation or a private company or a not-for-profit company or sort of a traditional NPO, it's not that significant. You are offering something of value to people that is being exchanged. You need to show up in the world in a way that is going to attract the attention of the right people. You need to engage with them and make what you offer so desirable that they want to transact with you. If you've convinced them to transact with you, you need to put everything in place that's going to allow you to deliver on what you've promised. You need to organize yourself in such a way that you stay sustainable and that the accountability structures within your organization is maintained, and you need to look at how you're doing. You need to assess, am I doing the right stuff? And it doesn't really matter what formation you are or what kind of organization you are. The things that you need to take into consideration in terms of all those elements of being successful are pretty much the same, I think I hear what you say. Is the policy would obviously influence the environment quite significantly, and what you mentioned about cooperatives, for instance. So if the government comes and put into place programs that are supporting cooperatives, and there's specifically funding linked to those cooperatives. So, for instance, there's a funding program, a grant, that if you are 5 people in a cooperative, 5 black people in a cooperative, you get quite a nice grant to get going with your machinery and so on, And in fact, on a training course that I mentioned earlier, there were people in that have formed two groups that have formed cooperatives. The one is a business involved in Knysna, involved in the production of vermicompost from various organic materials, and they set that off. They sell that. It's kind of a high quality organic product. They formed a cooperative. They were 5. Now 1 is not involved anymore, and they've got a bit of a problem. So there's kind of built-in problems if you start to try to be opportunistic about using these things. That sometimes you can perhaps shoot yourself in the foot a bit if you didn't anticipate what the outcomes could be. But in general, I think my comment would be that when I engage with people that are operating an organization like that, it's not much different from other training that I've done, for instance, for a group of tech-orientated businesses sponsored through Microsoft, sort of a program that I did recently. Same principles apply. Of course, the context is different and the language that you use is slightly different, but exactly the same stuff apply. So
I definitely agree with that. But I'm talking from the perspective of government and government policy, is that treating all these different types of organizations is pretty much the same.
Yes.
And believing that you can implement one strategy that's going to support all of them is a long shot, and I don't see that being successful.
Yes.
But of course, in terms of business principles, all types of organizations, they still need to run according to business principles as far as possible, or ethical business principles.
Yes.
But I see Jaco's back, and
so Jaco, can you try to speak, or are you still?
So yeah, I should be fine. We're just waiting for Karen to drop in another browser again quickly, because the thing is that the Hangouts work one-on-one. So when I speak to her one-on-one on Hangouts, everything's fine.
There we see a picture appearing.
But it might be an Apple issue. Karen?
Yeah, I've just come in on Safari, because 2 of these things said it would work on Safari or
excellent.
The other one, Firefox. Okay, can you hear me?
Good. So Karen, yes, we can hear you. I would suggest that you perhaps switch off your video, because your bandwidth seemed to be struggling a bit there to carry both the voice and the video.
For some reason, Apple and Chrome don't work together on this, but I've done it now. Okay, I'm going to just shut down my Chrome completely, because that might also be slowing it down.
Yeah, no, that's really better. So the one thing that Marcus and myself spoke about is that on this platform, to close every program on your computer that you're not going to use is advisable, especially those things like the Dropbox plugins and so on, the Google Drive plugins and so on that may be running on its own.
Okay.
So that's already much better.
Okay, cool. I think I've closed everything that I can see. I've basically shut down Chrome altogether, so I've just got Safari working.
So that's much better.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you, which is great.
Thank goodness for the next time when you're using an Apple Mac person, you tell them to use Safari.
Yeah, I'm in fact on Apple and I'm using Chrome, so maybe something else.
New Apple. New latest hot off the press from yesterday. I don't know, it might be a security setting they've put on. Anyway, it's working.
Okay, Karen, I would suggest like Marcus is now on, he switched his video off because he had bandwidth issues. And when you were speaking just now, it was, so we can test it again when we speak. But in any case, so the rule that we have is that we stay mute, you mute our mic.
Sorry?
So you shouldn't hear me say that because I'm using my microphone.
Gosh, my face looks huge, okay.
Yeah, you should. In fact, you should test it because Google does all funny things. They'll like put yourself in a round circle, even if you're a square person. but Marcus tested his photograph beforehand. He sort of tweaked it so that.
I don't know how to do that. Okay.
So, Karen, welcome to our talk. Jaco and Marcus and myself came together at one point. I think we were sitting in a coffee shop in the observatory, talking about what we could do to promote the discussion amongst people involved in social enterprise and start promote ways of looking at good practice and learn from each other, and just have fun while we're doing that too. So slowly but surely we want to build a resource that social entrepreneurs in the future can refer back to too. And a lot of the discussion is structured around the ebook that Marcus has developed. In fact, the topics that we're covering. It's also the topics that are being covered in the newspaper Small Business Connect. So in this month's edition of Small Business Connect, there is a story on UCAR, I'm not sure if you've seen that yet. It actually, I think it went onto the website today. So if you go to smallbusinessconnect.co.za, there should be an article on your story, which we're going to talk about today, about steps. And there's also an article by Marcus on the underlying tips and principles that he's covered in his ebook in a bit more depth, but which also relates to the approach that you've adopted. So hopefully there will be some interesting stuff coming from that we could learn about. But let's start off by just reminding ourselves. So Talking Social Enterprise is really an informal network geared towards discussion about social entrepreneurial issues, and specifically to help people that are interested in building their own organizations or businesses into thriving organizations that makes a difference in the different ways that they define that. So over time, we hope that there will be a bit of a community evolving around it. At the moment, it's not a very big community, but it is growing. So this forum, being through the Hangouts, being fairly accessible as long as you've got bandwidth. And I think what we've already learned is that here in South Africa, we are still very much struggling with that. I mean, there's the little technical issues that we had today around getting everyone on the call, and the fact that we can't all see video and have to go back to just seeing our pictures is testimony to that. But before we jump into issues around steps and what we can learn from that, Jaco, if I can call on you to give us a quick overview of stuff that you've noticed recently. Marcus and myself had a bit of a chat about training that I've done and the conference that we've attended in the past week already. But what have you noticed in this social enterprise space that's newsworthy?
Thanks, Christoph. There's three things that I'm going to chat about quickly today. The first one is the recent 2015 Green Pioneer Acceleration Program that was launched at the Seed Symposium in Nairobi recently. It's a collaborative effort by VC for Africa, Growth Africa.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jaco, but can you perhaps, it looks like there's maybe the internet in general is struggling tonight. So I would suggest that perhaps you also switch off your video while you talk to me. Rather make sure we can hear you properly and we can look at your wonderful picture there too.
Is my sexy
I
face
assume my
looking
video,
good?
it looks like my video and voice is coming through clearly. Is that true?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I won't show me my picture. I'll stay live then. But yes, okay. So sorry for maybe you can start over with what you were saying. I'm sorry for
cool, not a problem. So as I was saying, there's three items that I'm going to discuss quickly. The first one is the 2015 Green Pioneer Accelerator Program. It was launched recently at the Seed Africa Symposium in Nairobi. It's a collaborative effort by VC for Africa, Growth Africa, HIVAS, and then Impact Amplifier. And they're specifically looking for early-stage companies in the green space that are looking to scale. Applications are open, and the focus is to help enterprises that are addressing climate change or greening and renewable energy initiatives and help these guys scale. The curriculum and the practical experience is really designed to get you investment ready. So a lot of work on your finance, a lot of work on what's called your pitch deck, generally. And graduates will be able to access networks and investors to pitch to once they've graduated and once they're finished. It's open to Kenyan and South African companies, and deadlines for entry are the 1st of December. So there's ample time to get through it. So if you do have an enterprise that focuses in the green area, I think this will be a fantastic opportunity to work with some really great teams. I know VC for Africa and Growth Africa I've worked with a little bit over during my time with Aston, and obviously Impact Amplifier extensively with Max and with Pascal, and the guys are really great. Then the next thing that I want to chat quickly about is an event that's coming up. It's a social return on investment training workshop. It's being held by Alex Lemieux of Wise Impact. They've been doing a couple of these this year. I know a few weeks ago they had a half-day one, but this next set of training workshops will be full-day workshops in both Cape Town and Johannesburg. So that's quite exciting. The Cape Town workshop's happening on the 3rd of October at the Bandwidth Barn in Woodstock, and then the Joburg workshop is on the 15th of October in Woodmead. Tickets are 1,599 Rand ex-VAT, but there are some early bird tickets that are available at 1,399 ex if you book for Cape Town before this Friday and for Johannesburg before the 3rd of October. As you know, obviously impact measurement is a hot topic these days. It's not just about talking the talk so much as it is proving that you're walking the walk. So I think it's really an important component for the majority of social enterprises and civil society organizations in general to spend some time on really being able to measure their impact and report that. And I know that SROI is one of the slightly more preferred methodologies to use. And then the last item is also another event that's actually happening tomorrow, but it's a hangout being hosted by Ashoka and the MasterCard Foundation. It's the last in their Future Forward webinar series, and it's going to be a hangout similar to ours is, also a panel discussion hangout, but it closes a 7-edition discussion on how youth in Africa can be prepared for an evolving workplace. It's been a really exciting discussion so far, with a lot of talk around how the workplace is changing and how do we adapt the African workforce, and how do we prepare sort of the youth of Africa for jobs that in many instances don't really exist yet. So that's going to be quite exciting, I think, especially also because the panelists are coming in from Southwest and East Africa to discuss the topic of collaboration to solve youth employment. The three panelists are Regina Agaya, the founder of Soronko Solutions from Nigeria, then the Kenyan MP, the Honorable Kenneth Okath, and Marlon Parker of Cape Town and Arlabes fame, who I guess most of the people in the social enterprise space in South Africa have at least heard of Arlabes. They're a really great organization based here in Cape Town, doing a lot of work in Mitchell's Plain with marginalized youth. And doing some really exciting things with the city of Cape Town through their youth cafes. The chat starts at 4 tomorrow, and the nice thing is you can join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag #SocientChat. It's SOCENT chat. And I think this is going to be a really great discussion to follow. So these 3 items I'll post as per last time on our Facebook page with links to all of the details. And yeah, I think it'll be a great idea to either attend one of these workshops, attend the hangout tomorrow, or if you are in the greening economy, then definitely try and apply for that Green Pioneer Accelerator program. So that's everything that's come up in the very recent sort of month or so. I know that the space seems to be waking up a little bit more, so we've got some more activity picking up around workshops and conferences. There's obviously also the Innovation Summit that's actually happening this week in the city, but we'll probably be reporting on that next week and seeing what's come out of this, which is sort of the biggest innovation summit in South Africa. I think it's the 7th or 8th one that they're hosting, but it's a really great initiative that's being driven predominantly from Johannesburg, but it's exciting to see it reaching Cape Town shores finally.
Yeah, great. It's the 7th. By the way, I was intending to go there today, but they didn't get around this afternoon. But it is on the agenda tomorrow morning. So, yes, it's at the stadium, and I didn't know that they actually host these kind of events at the stadium. I don't think it's on the pitch. I think it's in the in the stand. I hope it would be an innovative conference if you had it on the pitch. But yes, thank you for that. Jaco, you will have to post, as you promised, those links and mentions on the Facebook page, because you broke up quite badly there at one point, and it sounded like there's stuff really to follow up in terms of competitions and entries and so on. So that is on Facebook, Talking Social Enterprise, written out in full. Talking Social Enterprise with a S, like the English as opposed to the American way of spelling it. And there could be a conversation happening there, I suppose, too. But if you can post those links there, then
yeah, they'll be up before the broadcast tonight finishes. So
Great.
while you guys are sharing to Karen, I'll jump into that side.
And if someone is watching this on YouTube, which in fact happens, so this is the interesting part of it, because as we speak, this call is being recorded onto YouTube. So if you are watching this, you are more likely than not to be watching it as a recording, because more people come later on watching it as a recording than join live, which is interesting, and that's apparently a trend on Hangouts. So we're all learning about how these things all fit together. But thank you for that, Jaco. It looks like the competitions and entry for winning prizes is on the increase. Is that a trend? Have you noticed that more and more of these competitions are out there? I know that I've been working with a project here in Cape Town called Waste to Food in Philippi. And Waste to Food just won the Seed Award, and Roger Jark had to travel up to Kenya to go and accept the prize money, which is great. You know, I feel very chuffed that I've been involved in a project that actually won an award. It hasn't happened much in my life before. So, but you reckon that's a trend, and why would that be a trend?
I've been seeing quite a lot of that. I think it's perhaps got to do with the fact that competitions get a lot of attention very quickly. So if you're looking to get together a pool of social entrepreneurs, a competition is a great way to do it. Obviously, it also, I think the payoff is quite good with these kinds of competitions. All social entrepreneurs always like getting a bit of free cash, so to speak, and it is quite a bit of effort getting writing into these competitions. Some of them really delve into the depth of your business, but for as long as, I think for the last 2-3 years, there's definitely been a major increase in attention on this, which I think is really, really exciting. Not only competitions with cash prizes, but also a number of competitions that'll induce you into programs, whether that be mentorship or acceleration programs. There are also a couple that will culminate in meeting with investors and so on. So I think it's a really exciting way to go about it. I do, however, think that on the flip side, of course, sometimes social entrepreneurs spend a lot of his time filling in for competitions, and perhaps that attention is sometimes redirected away from continuing to create amazing impact. But I think that kind of comes down to how the social entrepreneur himself manages his time and his ability to get his business out there. So it's a great way to get some attention to what you do, but I think it also should be taken in stride, and you shouldn't just be a competition-driven social entrepreneur. I think the real impact and the benefit that you get out of doing what you do should be the real payoff, regardless of whether you enter competitions or not.
Yeah, great. But you'll keep reminding us about these competitions coming up, so that if it is a good marketing opportunity for us in positioning our businesses or organizations, it is something that works great, you know, sort of to get that recognition. So talking about recognition, the topic of our discussion today is perhaps the counterpart of recognition, which is starting from recognizing within inside of yourself what it is that is driving you in your social enterprise. Why it is that you started the social enterprise? Why is it that you have sleepless nights sometimes? Why is it that you push through those difficult times to make something happen? And the difference that you try to achieve. So, Marcus, if I may ask, that I pass over to you to introduce that topic to us, and then lead us in a discussion with Karen around how, in steps, she's been practicing that, and hopefully we can learn. I'm sure we will learn something from that that we can apply in our own situations too.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Christoph. Let me know if I must mute the video, if it's clear or not. So, yeah, I'd definitely like to welcome Karen Moss to the Talking Social Enterprise show this evening. I've had the pleasure of working with Karen for a number of years, and in that time I've been very impressed with how much progress she's been making. And she's the founder and CEO of STEPS, which is a non-profit organization she started in 2005 to eradicate clubfoot in Southern Africa. And over the past 9 years, STEPS has expanded its footprint quite significantly. It now operates in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Tanzania, and even the Seychelles. And they've also been very successful at establishing global partnerships with organizations such as Miracle Feet, and we're going to talk about this, how Karen has done this a bit later. And just some more technical details. And so STEPS is a non-profit company at the moment. It relies on both donations and income in order to fund its social purpose. And for those, I always want to remind people what a social enterprise is. So a social enterprise is an organization that has an explicit social purpose and runs very much like a business. And the big thing is that they try to operate in a way that's good for society overall, and they use their profits to further their social purpose as far as possible. So we could easily, spend the next couple of minutes debating social enterprises, but I'd rather, get into the interview. So, welcome, Karen, to the show. And I think Karen needs to turn on her voice.
Turn it on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly, thanks.
Perfect, and I'm just going to mute my camera as well. So I'm curious, just for the basics, and what exactly is clubfoot? And, how many children are born with clubfoot?
Well, clubfoot's a very common birth deformity. It's one of the most common. It's probably on a par or even more than cleft palate.
Okay.
And what happens is while the baby's developing, the foot starts to turn in. It's to do with various things in the collagen, and there's, they've actually starting to discover more and more what the symptoms of clubfoot are, but actually they still don't know the cause. And we've done estimates about 1 in 500 children in South Africa are born with clubfoot, and Southern Africa and East Africa for that matter. They're all, we've got a slightly higher rate than the world average.
Okay.
In this.
So that means thousands of children in South Africa are born with clubfoot every year.
Yeah, at least 2,000, and then the backlog of children in the rural areas. There's a lot of children who are only getting to treatment when they're 1, 2, 3 years old, because there's a lack in some areas of awareness of treatment. So the clinics get pretty crowded in certain, especially the big clinics. With
children seeking treatment or parents seeking treatment for their children.
They normally go to a smaller one, and then it's misdiagnosed, or that people don't know how to treat it. And then they gradually go through the health system, and they get to one of the bigger hospitals, and they finally get treatment.
And proper treatment. And you advocate, I know STEPS advocates the Ponseti method of dealing with club feet and healing them. What exactly is the Ponseti method? I mean, how does this work?
I had personal experience of it because my son had it. He had the traditional clubfoot casting that was done 10 years ago, and all that was really doing was preparing feet for surgery. There were very few children whose feet would be repositioned from that. And the Ponseti method is just a different way of reshaping the foot. You basically put it in a cast every week, and it's put in a specific position, and it's the way you hold the foot and the way you put pressure on certain parts of the foot and the bones. It's very gentle, and the foot biodynamically goes into the right position, and the bones change shape because babies' bones are very soft. So it has the gold standard of treatment worldwide. It's all the orthopedic associations have taken it on board as the treatment of choice, and it's ideally suited to developing countries because you don't necessarily need a theatre time, and you don't even need surgeons. You can do it with physiotherapists and other medical people.
And how long does it take? I mean, the Ponseti method, from when you start applying it to when a child's feet have roughly the right position?
Well, it's in 2 phases. The first phase is to correct it, which takes, if you get a child at presents early, it can be about 6 to 8 weeks, and then they have a small procedure which is done under local anesthetic, and then the second phase starts, which is the maintenance phase, and that's up to the age of 4. And children actually sleep in a little, like a pair of shoes attached to a bar, and that is like a maintenance brace that keeps the feet in place. Otherwise, they start to pull in again, because whatever the deformity was that causes the feet to turn while the baby's developing is still active, and some feet are very resistant, and they will turn in again. So really, it's a 4-year commitment by parents, but it's very gentle on the babies.
And what were people doing before? I mean, the Ponseti method. I mean, if we go 10 years back in South Africa, what would we see rural clinics doing?
What they used to do in rural clinics was they would cast babies for months, and then they wouldn't have theatre time, and they'd basically just tell the mothers to go home, and there wasn't really an answer for most of them. They would just be disabled, the children.
And that would affect them for the rest of their life.
Yes, because you can't walk. You can't run if you've got club feet. You can walk, but you have to have special shoes because your feet are essentially upside down. Your feet, the top of the feet, become the sole of the feet. They're turned over. So without effective treatment, you are disabled. And this is what's so great about it.
So you're giving someone their life back, in a sense. You're removing a disability totally.
Yes, and particularly for people who are in already circumstances that aren't that easy financially, to live with a disability is even more of a strain on their family life, on community, and obviously all the emotional and socioeconomic things that go along with it. And it is really giving a person a completely different life perspective.
So definitely worthwhile. You must find your work very satisfying.
I do. I'm very much, even when I see children at 4 years old that haven't been corrected, that I still know that they can be helped. So it's when I see the adults with uncorrected clubfoot, that is really heartbreaking, because it's almost, that's something that can't really be changed by that age.
And you know that if they got to it early enough, it could have been avoided.
Yes, but it's also, it really depends on where you're born and how close you are to treatment. Because it is such a commitment by parents. But that's part of what we do, is to just try and bring it to people. We're trying to support parents and get them as many places as possible, or if not, then knowledge about it and where to go.
No, it's definitely a worthy cause. And I know we've often talked about your purpose, or clarity of purpose of STEPS. And you know how I feel about, I'm not a fan of vision and mission statements typically, because people just put so much jargon into them that they're not useful at all. So I've started saying to people, sort of, what is your purpose? In simple language, describe the purpose of your enterprise. Now, if I'd ask, what is the purpose of STEPS?
Well, the purpose is to eradicate clubfoot as a disability. That's the main.
And is that achievable for you?
Yes, it is. It's taken a while to get to that, but we're still growing the total blanket of treatment through the whole country, but it just keeps on improving. And I think as long as I just keep on remembering what the actual purpose is, even if you get kind of a little bit sidetracked along the way, because we're working in quite a difficult environment of public health, various different kinds of doctors and personalities, and people traveling long distances, and so it can be frustrating sometimes, and you maybe don't make as fast progress as you anticipate in a perfect world. But we're certainly going forward, which is always encouraging, and we're getting to our final goal, which I believe we can reach within the next 3 years to 5 years.
And this is what I love about STEPS is, your clarity of purpose, number one. The second is that it is achievable and it's measurable. You can basically measure how many clinics you're working with, measuring how many children you're helping, and so on.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, carry on. I was just going to say we're more and more involved in monitoring and evaluation, because we're understanding how important that is to keep track of what we're doing. And not only that, there hasn't actually ever been data recorded on clubfoot in Southern Africa. This is going to be a first for doctors, that we are actually putting data together for them. They will be able to look at the incidence of clubfoot, where people are coming from, and we can actually plan a national program from that.
Okay. No, definitely, it's definitely worthwhile. And so, if your purpose is to eliminate clubfoot in Southern Africa, and what are some of the main activities that STEPS does in order to achieve this purpose?
Well, training has always been one of that was really the first activity, was to get the message to the people who are actually treating the children and to train them, which we've been really successful, and so much so that we don't really need to do a lot of training of people in South Africa, because it is now being trained in the teaching hospitals. All the registrars learn it now, because the people we trained are training doctors that are going into the med school. We still do trainings in Botswana and Namibia. And the second part of training has become training parent advisors, because of the commitment from parents for this period of time. We really believe that the best thing we can do for parents is to give them as much information as they can, know right up foot from the start, and have people who are listening to them, because doctors just don't have the time to do that. So we are now training mothers we meet at clinics, who are unemployed and have children with club feet that have been through the treatment, and they are becoming parent advisors in the clinics. So we pay them a stipend, which we've fundraised for, and we started it in the Western Cape, and we're about to move into Gauteng with it, and it's been extremely well received, and the clinics are very grateful for it, because they don't have the time or the people to do it. So
and you take the burden off the clinics. Because the clinics are totally, overworked at the moment and understaffed.
Yeah, there's great people working at the clinics, but I mean, they just don't have the time to spend a lot of time with each person, discussing it. What's quite interesting is the mothers, the more information they're getting, the more the mothers are getting enthusiastic about it. I'm going to be at Baragwanath Hospital tomorrow, Chris Hani, and I've been told that some mothers have started a little WhatsApp group that they're communicating with each other, which I think is amazing, because the more that people talk to each other, the more information they're going to share.
And the more likely it is that children will receive the proper treatment.
Yes. And what follows on from our training is awareness and advocacy. So it's taking it out into the community, and we've designed posters in 5 languages and parent take-home leaflets that they can. Because I've done research on this, and I did a paper on it, a poster, but in June, and it's quite interesting that about 80% of what a doctor tells you, you will immediately forget, and 20% of what you retain is incorrect. So, and that's everybody. It doesn't matter how well educated you are, because it kind of shuts down your brain. Plus, you're now a parent with a pretty stressful situation. You're not going to retain much. So we've added print, which is very powerful means, and a lot of illustrations with it, so that when they get home they can jog their memories a bit and see what's going on, and there's quite a lot of helpful tips and information on those as well. So
now I've seen your material and the book as well that I believe Steps has.
Yes, you wrote a little book about for kids, to bedtime story.
for children who've got club feet.
Yes.
And over the last couple of years, the one thing I've been extremely impressed as well by the way that you've managed partnerships, essentially, because despite you exist in quite a politicized industry, from the way you've explained it to me, there are a lot of agendas and a lot of strong personalities and quite a lot of egos in some areas, and at a national level and international level. And yet you seem to be able to navigate this very easily. And I've always, never quite understood what your magical recipe is. So perhaps you could share it with us.
Well, I realized my recipe only after a while, and it works every time for me, is when I remove myself from the situation and I think about that child who's having clubfoot treatment, and that immediately just kind of recenters me, and I don't get involved in any of the politics, and I just stick as long as it's about the patient. There's a doctor that once said to me, the Canadian, he said, a few years ago I was getting, quite sort of despondent about things that had happened, and he said to me, you've got to realize you're the end user, you've got rights, and serve all those patients. And that's really what for me is my key, is it's not about me, it's about the kids. And it sounds a bit mushy, but it's actually practical, because it's much easier when you remove yourself from it in that way. I've still got my drive about it and my interest, but for me it's about them.
So what you're saying is that by having that clear sense of purpose, it helps you navigate firstly the political environment, and
exactly.
secondly, to establish partnerships even amongst people who don't necessarily get along with each other.
Yeah, because if you think about all those people, they actually, even though they might not be aware of it, have the same purpose as you. They're also trying to fix kids' feet. So when you take that, all the egos and the arguments and the hidden agendas out of the way, they all want to do the same thing. Some people just don't go about it in a different way.
Okay, because I know you've got now very constructive and healthy partnerships with people such as, I know Miracle Feet is one of them. And,
yes.
and there are a number of other international organizations that you're working very closely with.
Yes, well, the Ponseti International Association is the sort of home of Ponseti Clubfoot there in Iowa. And the man who treated my son was Dr. Ponseti. He's now no longer alive, but he lived until the age of 95, and I was lucky enough to meet him when he was 89 and have a really, fruitful relationship with him for 5 or 6 years. And then his protege and successor is another doctor in Iowa called Dr. Mukwende, and we have a good relationship. And then STEPS became a member of Global Clubfoot Initiative, which is a non-profit based in England. And we've got various members from all over the world, and their focus is clubfoot training and education, and a lot of advocacy as well. And just when there's a couple of other organizations that are also working in other parts of Africa, and sometimes I'll get an email from a patient who's in Malawi or somewhere, and then we send them to each other. So we I think it's in the last couple of years there's been more awareness of how important communication is between all of these organizations. I think up until about 3 years ago, everyone was doing their own thing, but it's gradually pulling together into more of a global effort, which is quite much more
around a very achievable goal.
Yes, I think that's always what's so nice. It is a good news story. It's there is a solution to it
And the solution is like startling in the sense that it's black and white. You've either got clubfoot or you've been able to apply the Ponseti method and don't have it.
That's right, and you just have a completely normal life. My son's almost 12 and he runs cross country and he plays sport, and he was born with bilateral club feet, and
so it shows how effective the method is.
Yeah. I think the good thing about the Ponseti method is there's very little fallout from scar tissue and the early onset arthritis, which the old type of surgery was pretty high risk for those things.
And just moving on to talk a bit about income. So I know that that STEPS is funded quite a bit by donations, but at the same time, you've been very keen on introducing social enterprise elements in terms of consulting income or the shop or selling orthopedic equipment. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about how STEPS is planning to generate income.
Yes, about 2.5 years ago, I think I had a strategy session with some. It was a pro bono strategy session from the SAPI ex-CEO and one of his advisors, and they very kindly did a whole day with us. And what came out of that strategy session was that the braces that I was talking about, the kids sleep in for 4 years, were our sort of potential for creating income. And from that, it sort of led into, we then became a medical device supplier. I had to register with the Board of Health Funders. We now have an import-export code. We're importing low-cost braces from Kenya. We're importing expensive braces from the States. We can do medical aid invoices, and we believe that in the next year there's some mass-produced braces that we'll also be distributing and supplying to clinics, direct government clinics. So that's become something that, and the other thing we do, we always combine it with our purpose, as you know. So what we do is we get donated braces, which we then give to clinics. Plus we also do a service for parents where, because these braces are so expensive when they're imported, we recycle them. So parents send us their old ones, we give them another pair, and one pair can be used 3, 4, 5 times. And we have a charge for that, which parents are happy to pay, and that goes back into STEPS. So we've managed to create income plus providing a very vital service for these parents.
I mean, would you say that your business background helped in the way that you're approaching the work of STEPS?
Oh, definitely. I think it's a combination of the business background and then understanding that it is a business, but it's slightly different to business because you're not sort of making a profit for shareholders or people like, you know, and it's actually a nicer way for me to work. I prefer it.
So you find your work pretty satisfying, I can see.
I do. Yeah. I feel more comfortable doing it this way. I like to be able to put the money back into what I'm doing. And the more that we build things up, I think the more sustainable we're going to be. It's already, when my accountant just looked back at the last 8 or 9 months at the income that we've produced, I was quite surprised that she didn't realize that we could do so much in such a short time.
And you're just warming up.
Yeah.
And so just I'd like to chat a bit about challenges, because I'm sure that it hasn't been plain sailing since 2005 when you set up STEPS. And
not at all.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you and STEPS have experienced over the last 9 years?
Well, I've had sort of some things that went very quickly in the beginning, like I managed to get some funding so I could do the training, but I found there's sort of troughs, you know, and you get periods of time, and a lot of it, when I started, I felt quite alone. What I really enjoy now is how much people are talking to each other. Because I did go through a couple of courses years ago, but they were very isolated, and I found I didn't really have much in common with a couple of people who were there. But since the internet has really taken off, and all these sort of webinars, and you can really get a lot of valuable information. So that was one of my issues, was feeling kind of, am I doing the right thing? You know, having much feedback on what I was doing, and also making mistakes sometimes in how I approached things. I wanted things to be faster than they were, and you know, kind of understanding that things have a natural flow. Sometimes you can't always push things. You can't push people sometimes. You know, some people you need to kind of see what people's strengths are and.
Sorry, your mic is a bit quiet all of a sudden. I don't know if you've changed your position.
I heard a beeping noise, but I don't know what caused it.
I can hear you again.
Okay.
Yes, and in the future, I mean, what do you see STEPS focusing on in the next couple of years?
What we'd like to do is to provide even more support to parents and clinics, and become more professional in the way that we do it. So we're going to have lots more of a paper trail, which we had, but it's going to be even more involved in terms of keeping track of what we're doing, having more of a network of people around the country to advise parents, and building up a program that will be the same in every place that that a child goes. So try and get more uniformity, and to support the doctors, because they have got a lot of things to deal with, and Clubfoot's only one of them. And I must say that every time we go into a clinic, they're so happy to see us. So many people just expect these things to work, you know, in government. I really think that the more we can support them, the better the outcome is for patients.
And you've been winning these doctors over, I mean, steadily.
Yeah.
You didn't have great relationships with all of them in the beginning, or some of them were quite suspicious about STEPS.
Yeah, there were some initially, but that was in the early days, and I think luckily a lot of doctors saw the value of us very early on, and they became like our network of doctors that kind of supported us. So the ones who, it's funny how things turn around, you know, a lot of the ones who were suspicious are now our biggest allies, but I mean, it does take time to build relationships of trust, and to just always try and be as ethical as possible, and to manage those relationships, especially when you've got overseas or donors that maybe aren't in the same culture as you. Then you've got to kind of understand, you know, what message you're giving out to the doctors and to the donors. It's kind of a balancing act to get the right responses from everybody.
But you've been obviously walking that tightrope quite carefully and quite well.
Yes, I think most of the time, and it's funny, you know, I gave a talk also to doctors about steps about 3 years ago, and one of the things I said to them, because when you've got to do a talk, then it's a good way to regroup and think back on what you've done, because otherwise you're busy, you know, racing forward. You don't always think about these things. And I think what's been the secret to building those relationships is never, if a door closes, it's not always closed. You know, people move around, people change. There's nothing wrong with going back again a year later. You know, maybe that door slammed in your face the first time, but the second time there might be a friendlier doctor there, or the one who you thought maybe wasn't that into it is all of a sudden excited and he's happy that you came back. So it's a kind of persistence. Yeah.
And just to close off with a set of questions then, and what advice would you have for a young or starting social entrepreneur that's just beginning their journey?
I think definitely important to have good financial knowledge. So maybe to do a course on some business course. It doesn't have to be a long course, but just something to understand the basics of how finances work, and to network with people and find a mentor or two that advise you, and just don't take no for an answer. Just keep on trying while you're being because I think really persistence and tenacity are two things that will certainly keep you going on this journey, because it's not easy in the beginning.
And add a clear sense of purpose as well to that recipe.
Yes.
You know, a persistence with a clear sense of where you're going.
Yeah, I think if you don't have a purpose, then you pretty much waste your time.
So yeah, I'd like to just and so Corin, I'd just like to thank you for this. It's been very, very insightful. And I'm hearing an echo from somewhere. Yeah, Christoph?
Yeah, maybe you're hearing the echo from me because I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. So I was just saying thanks so much to Karen for sharing her insights with us.
Yes, I was kind of stunned and under awe of the story. So this is really inspirational. In fact, I think we should just kind of clip this part of our discussion today and promote it on the internet, because I also find it very inspiring. You know, sort of combining the personal story with something that became an organization that's really helping so many people to improve the quality of their lives. So, you know, Karen, well done. You know, sort of maybe not out of choice that you were thrown into the situation to have to deal with your son's situation. But yeah, I mean, how inspiring can it be? And then, of course, if one follows the discussion that you've had around how you can shift into creating income streams for your organization or your business that you might not have thought of when you started out, that's also kind of very insightful and I suppose inspiring for every one of us to find ways of making sure that we become more sustainable. So I'm not sure, Jaco, you may also have a question also to Karen, but we've got this thing of sharing a coaching tip, which I just want to throw in here quickly. We can come back to the discussion because it's so closely related. It's in fact exactly the same point that this topic is about. If I can just click there, present to everyone. You should be seeing there 3 circles. Now, what happens often if we start talking about what we do, we talk about what we do as opposed to why we do it. And this little model, which in fact is promoted by someone called Simon Sinek, who wrote a book called Start With Why. In fact, he reflects more on commercial organizations and success in big companies. But exactly the point that you've made now, Marcus, in terms of the clarity of purpose, which is the why. And what Simon Sinek says, companies that are hugely successful are the ones that understand that there's not much distinction in how people do things nowadays, or even what they do. The products and services that people offer are kind of more or less the same. You know, sort of you've got an iPad or a tablet, you know, sort of, or Samsung or whatever. And it's kind of the same thing. It can do the same stuff. But the choices that people make in terms of where they go has increasingly to do with the purpose or the why and the way the companies project themselves. And in a way, I think that this then starts position purpose-based organizations much stronger in the mind of the general market, so when we start doing stuff, social enterprises, if we apply this way of thinking, in fact, we have an advantage because we are purpose-driven. And not to shy away from talking about that purpose. So, even at a networking event or when we introduce our business, to be very clear about the bigger purpose that we are pursuing. So that's just kind of a side note, but I think it fits very well into the discussion thus far.
Yes,
so Jaco, yeah.
Sorry, just to add quickly. So what Karen, to recap on purpose and steps, is they've got a very clear purpose. It's focused, and it can be described without using any jargon at all. And it's easy for people to understand exactly what steps does. So those are just one or 2 points, but too few organizations can do this. So I'm getting an echo again.
So if I can ask, in terms of clarifying your purpose, you spoke a bit about that just now, but in what ways would you say organizations or businesses that are maybe not so clear about describing their purpose in a paragraph or a sentence, what could they do to help them in getting to the point where they can clearly define that and speak about that in the public too?
Yeah, I think that's you have to really boil it down to you can take a whole paragraph or what do they call your elevator pitch when you go to a congress or something. It's really trying to even just and taking something from that. Maybe if they really a session strategist, because sometimes it's good to have a bit of outside. The person is not that involved emotionally or attached to it. They might be able to find the purpose that you didn't realize was your purpose.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Speak to someone else, not just in the mirror, and hear what they have to say in terms of how clearly you are saying what you want to say. So I'm not sure. Can we step off this topic, or Jaco or Marcus, do you still have something more, or Karen, a comment that you want to make?
No questions from me, guys. Thanks.
I'm not sure talking, so nothing from me.
Yeah, so just to say thanks again, Karen. To reiterate, it's this kind of inspiring stories that we need to tell more, so that more people can get involved in social entrepreneurial activities. So I'm not sure, Jaco, you still have something for us to say about marketing tip for us to sign off today with a call, and perhaps also in terms of how people can interact. Perhaps someone is watching this video on YouTube, what our online presence is and how they can register for the next call, because in fact if you want to have the link to come into the call and participate in the chat, you have to come through the registration process, which means that you have to fill in your name and your email.
Yeah, thanks, Christoph. So yeah, as you said, if anybody's watching this on YouTube and not joining the live broadcast in the webinar itself, the real difference is just that if you're in the webinar, you can utilize the chat function with us. You can directly speak to us and ask questions to the interviewee or our guest for the month. The best way to stay in touch with us is to keep your eye either on the website or on Facebook. On the website, it's just www.talkingsocialenterprise, all one word, .net. We usually update that a day or so after we've got everything sorted for our next one. So I guess by tomorrow or the day after, we'll have details for our next webinar ready. Same on Facebook. You can join us at facebook.com/Talking Social Enterprise. And as Christoph mentioned earlier, that's Talking Social Enterprise. Enterprise with an S, as in the UK spelling of it. That's the best way to stay in touch. The majority of our live data, so updating on specific news items and so on while we're chatting, is happening on Facebook. And we like to keep conversation going there as well. If you've got any questions or anything like that while we're broadcasting, you're more than welcome to just drop us a little message on Facebook, and we'll either work it into the program or answer you afterwards. And then, yes, with regards to a marketing tip, if you will, I think something that Steps does quite well, and organizations that people relate to quite well in general. I think a common trend between them is this idea of really punting the good work that you do, as opposed to just focusing on the problem that you're trying to solve. Obviously, the problem is usually a major aspect of defining your purpose, and I think that's why it's quite relevant tonight. But I think too much focus on the problem tends to create a negative space and a bit of negative energy around your communications. What's usually quite great is to sell the success. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the topics we will be doing in our series is selling success. And it's a great way to market yourself. It's a great way to open up conversation with people, to show them the good work that you're doing, and not just talk about the problem and the issue. It's a great fundraising tool, because people tend to, or investors and donators tend to resonate more with positive stories, with this idea that we're helping to build a solution, not just sustain an issue. And I think it's a very exciting way to do it. You can have a lot of fun with the metrics of not only just the numbers of people that you're helping, but also the improved livelihoods. I think one of the things that Karen was chatting about quite a bit, obviously, was this idea that what they do is really a life-changing experience, and it's a life-changing thing. And that just speaks exactly to this idea that we're trying to push positive stories. Even when we're working predominantly on Aston, one of the things that myself and Marcus always focused on was not getting bogged down in any of the politics or the dark and dreary sides of things, but trying to really sell the successes of the space, focus on the opportunities, focus on the goodness. And I think that's something that social enterprises do a little differently than many charities, if I can make that distinction. Not to say that charities don't do it, but I think that the old way of doing it was focusing on showing people the size of the problem, and then following up with exactly what you're doing and how you're addressing that. I think a slightly newer way these days is to focus on, like I said, the successes and really the change that you've been able to make, and the influence that you've had on the beneficiaries that you're serving. Essentially, what you're doing, again, as Karen said, in defining your purpose, it is about them. It is about the beneficiaries. It is about the why you're doing what you're doing. And I think out of that, it gives us the opportunity to really focus on the goodness, on the greatness of what we're trying to achieve as social entrepreneurs, and what this sector is all about. The sector is about excitement. It is about enthusiasm. It is about understanding the reality of situations, but about seeing the opportunity in dreary situations quite often. And I think it's also a great way to really get people behind you, to get great support by punting the good work that you do, and not just focusing on the problem itself. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Christoph? Okay, and Jakob?
Yeah.
So thanks. That's actually one of the topics that features in the ebook as well. Is you touched on this idea of sell success, not failure, not problems.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's a powerful thing. I think if you look at how African development has been changing over the last number of years, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was about how poverty-stricken Africa was, and how many challenges there were that we had to address. And there was HIV, and it's tuberculosis, and it's this disease, and it's that problem, and lack of connections and infrastructure issues. But now that whole story has changed a little bit. If you look at the majority of communications, people are talking about the opportunities that lie in Africa. The fact that just that there is no infrastructure doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity for new technology. And I think the green space speaks to that quite a bit. I think it's difficult when you're dealing with healthcare issues. It might be a little bit more challenging. But the way that we've approached it has changed significantly, and I think that also speaks to the enthusiasm of the space. And innovation is it's a happy space to be in. It can be very tough to work in this space, and I think that's also a reason why it's important to focus on the positive. I think it's you can very quickly be overwhelmed by the problem that you're trying to address. But if your communication focuses on the positivity, it also inspires. I think it inspires you to focus a lot more on just doing what you're doing and keep making inroads into that issue, and trying to mitigate the almost depressive space that sometimes we find ourselves in working in the non-profit and in the social space when we're dealing with very difficult issues.
So I'm not sure, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure why that happened, but another little glitch. But we really had an interesting discussion tonight. I must say I feel inspired to go start work on my next project already, not to go to bed. And I suppose that's part of what we try to achieve here too, is that through the sharing of our stories, we inspire each other to go and do some great stuff. So on that note, I think it's maybe opportune for us to say, let's stop this broadcast. Thank you very much, Karen, for sharing your story with us and for teaching us a point or two in terms of how we can go in implementing those two. Jaco and Marcus, as usual, thank you very much for your contribution too. And looking forward to what we'll be doing next month. So on that point, let's say goodbye to everyone and see you at our next call.